Good morning. It's been an immense enthusiasm that we welcome you to connect with us for the first International Fesquali. Today, we're going to begin building the bridge between Fesquali Brazil and Fesquali Miami. Soon, Fesquali Latam. A new movement that does not count only on professional serialism, not with formal protocols, but also with focuses on providing relevant content. Keep in mind that your certificate is going to be issued in 30 days right after the event closes. We would like to thank all of the speakers, volunteers, technical team, and most importantly, you that registered and will be with us throughout these 30 days of activities. And to start, we would like to welcome Nigel Croft. He's going to talk a little bit about his experience and with the Global Authority in Quality Management Systems, and Conformity Assessment. He is the president of the ISO/TC 176 SC2 during the preparation of ISO 9001 in 2015. He's also the current president of the ISO Technical Coordination Group for its Management Systems Standards Portfolio. How are you, Nigel?
I'm really good, thank you. Looking forward to it. Can you hear me okay? And can you see my screen okay, I guess is the first question.
Okay. They're both fine.
Can you see just my screen or can you see me as well?
We can see both.
Oh dear, that means everybody can see my bad haircut from too long of COVID. Okay, yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here. I have to remember how to speak in English because obviously I am English. I was born English, but also proud to be a Brazilian citizen. And it's great to be with everybody in this Fesquali Miami event. I would like to be there personally, but then I would probably subject everyone to seeing me in my Speedo trunks on the beach, and that probably wouldn't be a good idea. So great, thank you for inviting me. And as they say, shall we get on with the show?
Of course, we can't wait to hear all you have to share with us. I'm going to be in the backstage. If you need anything, just let us know.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks. Well, the title and the overall theme of Fesquality is quality to come. What do we expect from quality in the years to come? And I chose the title of In Pursuit of Broad Quality for my presentation. Now, one of the great advantages of being the first presenter is that I can use a broad brush approach. I can set the scene because I know that many of the topics that I'm going to touch on will be dealt with in much more detail over the course of the next 3 days. You mentioned about ISO 9001, of course. As chairman of the international committee that wrote the 2015 version of ISO 9001, I'm a firm believer in quality management systems, but equally I recognize that quality is about much more than ISO 9001. It's about much more than writing procedures or getting compliance or getting a certificate. Dr. Duran used to talk about quality with a small q and quality with a big Q. And I term those these days as narrow quality and broad quality. Now, one of the things that we're doing within ISO at the moment, some of you may be familiar with, is developing a new guideline standard, which will be ISO 10010 on how to develop a quality culture. Because a quality culture in an organization is the basis for everything that an organization does. And really, it's the fundamental building block to move us from this narrow quality approach to broad quality. So what I want to do in the next few slides is to talk a little bit about, what do we mean by quality as a whole? And I hope we all know what we mean, but sometimes it's good to start from first principles. Then we'll look a little bit about where we see quality going. How do we make this transition from what we traditionally call narrow quality to broad quality? What are the tools and techniques that we have, and how does that relate to standards and to processes? So first of all, when we talk about quality, the formal definition, as in ISO 9000, the terminology standard, the formal definition of quality is the degree to which a set of inherent characteristics fulfills requirements. A requirement, if we look at the definition of that, is a need or expectation that is stated, generally implied, or obligatory. So if we think about, a hotel room, and I'm reserving a hotel room, I have some requirements that are stated, as in my reservation, that I want a double room on a high floor away from the elevator so that people are not making noise and waking me up in the middle of the night. They are stated requirements. I'm not going to say that I want clean sheets on the bed and I want towels in the bedroom and in the bathroom and hot water, because that's implied. And equally, I'm not going to say that I want to make sure that the building that I'm staying in meets the fire regulations, or there's an emergency earthquake exit if I'm staying in Japan or whatever. They are mandatory and obligatory. So quality is the extent to which the distinguishing features of that product or service that I'm purchasing fulfills those needs and expectations that I have as a customer, or depending on other circumstances, as a citizen, or as a consumer, or as a worker. Those distinguishing features may include things like physical strength. It may be sensory. Does something taste good? Does it smell good? Behavioral, politeness, temporal. Are things being produced on time? Are they comfortable? And are they functional? So when we think about quality, we need to remember that this definition can apply to products, it can apply to services, to processes, people, and to organizations. And what we tend to see these days is that consumers, as they become more mature, they're concerned not only with the product quality, but in the quality of the way in which that product or service is provided. And we'll talk a little bit more about the social, environmental, governance issues that customers and consumers come to expect from an organization that is providing them with quality products. So we're talking about products, services, processes, people, and organizations. So then we can think of quality in terms of needs and expectations being met, but then we need to ask whose needs and expectations. Is it just the customer? Is it just the contractual customer? What about health and safety in a workplace? Is that important from the quality dimension? Of course it is. In which case, it's not particularly the customer that we're concerned with, it's the workers and those who are taking part in the organization's activities. But if we start with what I would call narrow quality, which is where we were up until the 1970s, 1980s. ISO 9001 was first published in 1987, and basically it focused on quality assurance in what I would call an analog world to make sure that customer requirements are met. The focus, of course, being on the contractual customer. So we had this idea of quality assurance in an analog world. Today, of course, things are very, very different. And we'll talk a little bit about Industry 4.0, what we're calling Quality 4.0 later in the presentation. But this all comes around the question of big data and the opportunities and the risks and the governance issues and the sustainability issues surrounding that will help us to move towards this idea of broad quality. So if we think about this question of digitalization and big data, what does broad quality mean in that context? Of course, in the era of big data, there are new challenges to assure the quality of the products and services that are being provided by internet service providers, by wireless operators, via streaming service, via social media, etc., related to speed of transmission, reliability, cybersecurity, and so on. So one way of thinking about broad quality might include thinking about how do we apply traditional QA methodologies in a digital world, and what are the challenges that that might bring. So we can think about quality then in that context as expanding our narrow definition of quality to the current digital big data world, still thinking about the relationship between the supplier and contractual customer. But is that enough? I would say no, it's absolutely not enough. We need to think of broad quality, not just in terms of the quality of the product, but including all customer touch points, the so-called customer experience. How easy is it to do business with company X? They may have got a very good product, but their customer service is terrible. It's very, very difficult to navigate through their website, to access product and service data, and so on. So it may be as simple as getting a hold of a real person. The chatbots may be very, very technically advanced, but they don't tell me what I need to know within the time frame that I need to know it. So when we think about broad quality in that context, we're basically moving further away from just the meeting contractual customer requirements to looking at the overall customer experience. And so what we begin to see is that this idea of broad quality has a number of different dimensions to it. Other factors that affect business performance. Is it just about an organization providing quality products and services to their contractual customers and providing experience to the customers? Well, in general, a customer, I know what I want as a customer. I want the best possible product at the cheapest possible price, with all the guarantees and all the bells and whistles associated with it. Well, if my supplier gives me everything that I want, we will ultimately probably have a very, very happy customer and one very, very bankrupt supplier if they are not able to do that in a way that allows them to make a decent profit. And so what we start to see is that we need to move from narrow quality, just focusing on the products and service quality, to other dimensions within the organization. So other management system elements are becoming increasingly important to customers. The environment, health and safety, information security, social responsibility. To the organization itself, efficiency, doing more with less. And that's not just about making bigger profits. It's about being able to provide products at an easier price, at a more accessible price. Or if we're a non-profit, for example, a hospital, it's attending more patients with the limited resources that we have available. So we're looking at efficiency, we're looking at performance, and we're looking at profitability, of course. And so when we look at that from an internal perspective as an organization, these are things that we need to consider as being important for us. And ultimately, of course, they are important for our customers and for consumers. So that's another dimension to quality within the internal context, moving from narrow quality to broad quality. But we can also think along the supply chain. We need to look beyond the contractual customer to the end user experience. What is the overall consumer experience with our product? And what about the way in which we deliver our product? What about our suppliers and their suppliers and our sub-suppliers? As we move in these last 10, 15, 20 years towards instant feedback on social media, if we see that one of these N-level suppliers, a sub-supplier of raw materials, and it's made noticeable that they are using child labor, or they are using unfair trade practices, or they've been corrupting officials by bribery, or maybe they're using slave labor. If that becomes known to the consumer, then the consumer very quickly will boycott the main product and service provider, and that will affect their perceptions of that organization as a quality organization. And so that move from narrow quality, just in the contractual sense, to the extent along the value chain is also one way of looking from narrow quality to broad quality. So if we put all of that together, this is where we started. Quality assurance focus for small data, end-to-end supply chain. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're not able to see your presentation. We're seeing it on the PowerPoint, but it's not going with the slides.
Do you mean there's a delay, or?
We're only seeing the PowerPoint page. We're not seeing it on the full screen.
Oh, that's weird.
And then yes, there it is. Now just click on, yeah.
That's where I was before.
It's not going. We can't see it.
Well, should a quick workaround, if I just leave it like that, is that okay?
I think that works better because when you go to full screen, we're not able to see it anymore.
Oh, okay. Oh, I apologize.
So I think that works out better.
Yeah.
No problem.
So you've just been listening to my voice without seeing the slides, yeah?
Yeah, but that one now is good.
Okay, all right. Well, this is the summary of everything that I was saying, basically. So it's a good point to have brought that to my attention. So what we see essentially is this overall move from quality assurance, small data, meeting contractual customer requirements, moving along the value chain to the overall customer experience, the overall consumer experience, back along the value chain in the other direction towards the sub tier suppliers, looking at quality not only from the quality of the product and service, but from all the different dimensions that are important, of course, to an organization, question of productivity, efficiency, profitability, but also things that are becoming more and more important for consumers, the ESG, environmental, sustainability, governance, social responsibility issues, and so on. So this is the way that I see broad quality evolving more in the future. Now, if we now look at what does that mean to an organization, we talk a lot about the business excellence journey, and there are many different ways of looking at this. You know, an organization that really doesn't have any thoughts about quality possibly starts hearing some quality initiatives. Oh, you need to do 5S program, or oh, you need to do statistical process control, or you need to have a suggestions plan, or whatever, to having some sort of a systematic approach, which typically comes with the implementation of a quality management system, increasing maturity, 9004 organizational quality towards business excellence models. Now, it's not all about a system. Of course, you need to have the system, but you need to understand and to be able to use the appropriate quality tools and methodologies. What is appropriate for your organization? What are the soft skills that are needed? What are the hard skills? You know, statistical techniques, things like problem-solving methodologies, standardization practices. How do we apply those within the context of our particular organization? And of course, now as we look towards the future, we have what we're calling Quality 4.0, which nobody really knows what it is yet. We've got a number of research projects underway, particularly here in the UK, looking at Quality 4.0 and its relationships to Industry 4.0. So we'll talk a little bit more about that dimension in the next few slides, and I know that there are a number of other speakers who are going to be talking about this in more detail. For me, this all began, and I think the contextualization of this comes from a book that was published actually in 2014, which was almost, I believe, before we were starting to talk about Industry 4.0. And that book was written by a couple of MIT professors, Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, and it was called The Second Machine Age. And they talked about the digital transformation, and I think this is a very, very useful quote, because I think it puts everything into perspective. Computers and other digital advances are doing for mental power, the ability to use our brains to understand and shape our environments, what the steam engine and its descendants did for muscle power. So we're not necessarily talking about replacing the human. What we're talking about is using the digital advances that we have made in the last 20 years to help us to do things better, to be able to analyze data much more efficiently, much quicker, huge amounts of data in a way that our simple brains could never do that. And so I believe that certainly when I talk about Quality 4.0, I'm talking essentially about quality in the age of Industry 4.0. So associated with things like robotics and artificial intelligence and machine learning, Internet of Things, Internet of Everything. And as quality professionals, we will all need to ensure that we have the skills to allow us to leverage all these great advantages, including the opportunities they bring, but also the risks associated with them. So we need to understand the tools to be able to implement the tools and methodologies and use them to their maximum benefit. Not just say, oh, here's a tool now, how can we use that? We need to look and say, what is the problem we want to solve? What are the issues that we have within our organization? And what are the tools that we need to help us to overcome those? And equally, quality professionals need to be able to understand the new technologies to use them themselves. Now, it's no good going in as an auditor, for example, and trying to use traditional auditors' approaches for auditing a total virtual organization where there is probably no central office and people are working from home, or they're working from their own personal devices and so on. We can't just go along and say, please show me your quality manual and give me a hard copy of the quality manual, because it doesn't exist. And so we have to move with the times as well. So there are an awful lot of opportunities that we can see as we make this move towards broad quality. And I like definitions. I used to think that ISO 9000 was the boring bit of the ISO 9000 family, the definitions. But I'm becoming increasingly converted to the idea that when we talk about a topic, we need to understand the basics. And if we look at the definition of opportunity, there is no definition in ISO 9000 because it is a dictionary definition. And in the latest version of the ISO directives, which will be published early next month, Annex SL, which many of you are familiar with, which is the structure for all management system standards, we do actually make reference to what is an opportunity. And an opportunity is a time or a set of circumstances that makes it possible to do something. Now, that something, it may be time limited, it may be situational. An opportunity, for example, at the moment, as sad as it may be, is that there is a huge opportunity, market opportunity, for people who are producing personal protective equipment within the global coronavirus pandemic. So it makes it possible for them to do something. It's an opportunity, if we look on the positive side, to spend more time with our families. I'm very happily married, I'm glad to say. And, my wife and I are enjoying the time that we're having together, and the fact that I'm not traveling. I'm not flying to Miami to make this presentation, as I probably would be doing under normal circumstances. So what we need to look at is we need to be able to recognize opportunities when we see them and take full advantage of them. Things, if we look back 20 years, we didn't have big data. We've now got predictive analytics. We've got artificial intelligence, IoT, IoE that I mentioned, cloud, quantum computing, 5G, streaming, social media, smart cities, smart factories, blockchain, and so on. So we've got all these wonderful new tools at our disposal. But, and I love this little slide, very, very simple. We have to remember, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So if we have these tools and we don't use them wisely, all we will do is create a complete mess that we don't know what's going on. We don't understand the core processes and the core systems. And we have all these sophisticated tools producing mountains or petabytes of data that really don't help us to achieve our objectives. And so we have to think about the risks associated with those tools and how to manage those risks. We had things like the Cambridge Analytica mining of data during the US presidential elections. We have cybercrime, money laundering, the global WannaCry virus, which happened a couple of years ago now, hacking of social media, personal data protection. Do we need backup processes? So these are all things that come with the opportunities. We have these challenges that we need to address. I'm also very, very cognizant of the latest thinking. I'm sure many people are familiar with the three wise monkeys: see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. But also we have the what's hidden behind here is the monkey that just sits there all the time playing with his cell phone and doesn't listen to what is going on, doesn't pay attention to what's going on around him. And I would certainly commend this book by Nicholas Carr called The Shallows: How the Internet is Changing the Way We Read, Think, and Remember Things. It goes into this whole question of, rather than immersing ourselves into what Deming would call profound knowledge, the deep thinking, if we're not careful, we get a superficial knowledge of everything. And there is nobody with that profound knowledge to move the technologies forward. I love this little slide as well. This is a quote from Warren Bennis: "The factory of the future will only have two employees, a man or a woman and their dog. The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to make sure the man doesn't touch any of the equipment." This is where we are moving towards with robotics, with machine learning, and so on. So where do management systems come in to all of this? Where do standards come into all of this? How can management systems help? This is quite a busy slide, and it's actually easier to see if we look at it in full screen, but let's not worry about that for now. This is, if we think about sustainable development, we've got the economic component, we've got the environmental component, and hidden under here, we've got the social responsibility component. So all of those different dimensions that I was talking about earlier, many of them are addressed within the ISO portfolio of standards. Of course, over here in the economic arena, we've got ISO 9001, which is where all of this started back in 1987. We've got the sector-specific derivatives, the automotive sector, IATF 16949, telecom, aerospace, nuclear supply chain management, and so on. We've got other standards that I consider to be very much in this economic growth sector, things like IT service delivery, the ISO 20000 standard. We've got the information and documentation standards. We've got, moving closer to the social arena, we've got the food safety management requirements, ISO 22000. All of these, it's very, very difficult if you're working in the food arena. It's very difficult to separate food safety from quality of food or quality of the service of providing food, but there are subtle differences. And of course, food safety is one absolute core element of the quality of a restaurant or the quality of a food manufacturer and so on. Moving over here on the left, we've got the very well-known ISO 14001 standard. We've also got some less well-known standards, ship recycling, water efficiency management. I think it was the great late Bob Marley who said, we don't notice what we've got until you don't notice the well is dry until you can't get any water anymore. And so water efficiency management, water utilities crisis management, very, very important to quality if you are a utility company or if you are a hospital that needs water to conduct its activities. Over here on the right, obviously, health and safety, very, very important in the social arena. We've got the new ISO 21001 standard for education management system, business continuity management, road traffic safety management, sustainable event management. There is, and I think Carlos Gadsden will be talking, I don't know if it's in the USA room this week or if he's going to be in the Spanish room, but Carlos was instrumental in developing the ISO 18091 standard for ISO 9001 in local government. We've got energy management, ISO 50001, asset management, looking at maintaining not just tangible assets, but intangible assets as well. And one that is, starting to make quite a bit of noise, anti-bribery management systems, ISO 37001. And I see also there's somebody going to be speaking about that in detail as we move forward. So with all this panorama of standards, it's a question as an organization to look at your business context and say, which of these are important for me to incorporate into the way that I do business? And I detest the word integrated, the phrase integrated management system. For me, an organization should be aiming to have a single unified management system. And into that management system, it will integrate the different standards that it needs to address to help it to achieve its objectives. So obviously, there will be, I can't think of any organization that would want to address all of these standards within their own particular business context. But for some organizations, it may be very important to be certified, for example, or to implement an ISO IEC 27001 standard for information security. If you are in the, for example, if you are in the IT sector. But even if you're not in the IT sector, if you're a hospital, for example, or if you are providing tax returns or financial services, information security is very, very important. So you may want to take advantage of that standard, implement that within your business context, but not necessarily go for certification. The fact that you implement an ISO standard doesn't mean that you have to automatically seek certification to it. And then there are some newer ones. This is what I call my overflow list. These are some of the recent developments that didn't properly fit on that previous graph. We've got the ISO 30401 standard, published almost 3 years ago now, knowledge management systems. We have the ISO 41001 facilities management. How do you manage all the infrastructure associated with a university or a hospital, the air conditioning and the logistics and the maintenance and the cleaning of that particular activity? We've got the ISO IEC 27701 standard that extends the information security management for privacy information management. Consumers, citizens in general are becoming more and more concerned about use of personal data. Another dimension to quality as we broaden it out. Those of you who are familiar with the concept of compliance management probably already know the ISO 19600 guideline standard. Well, that will be replaced very, very soon, within the next 3 months. I believe it's in the final stages of production. The ISO 37301 standard on compliance management systems. That will be a requirement standard, and it will therefore be certifiable. And then finally, in this section would be the ISO 42000, ISO IEC 42001 standard artificial intelligence management system. So again, we need to be able to master and take full advantage of the different technologies that we've got, and obviously a management system is a very, very good way to do that. 42001 is only just getting underway, and so it's not like, well, it certainly won't be published this year, probably towards the middle or the end of 2022, or maybe even 2023. Other relevant standards. It's not just about management systems. We have the overarching ISO 26000 social responsibility guideline standard. We have any number of voluntary sustainability standards that consumers in many developing economies are becoming very conscious of. And if we're not careful, they can become technical barriers to trade. Certainly here in Europe, Forestry Stewardship Council, FSC, PEFC for forestry, sustainable forestry management. Most of the products, whether it's paper or whether it's wooden furniture or whether it's cardboard packaging, consumers expect to see some sort of a sustainability attestation associated with that. Fair trade. Rainforest Alliance, looking at social and environmental issues associated with the agricultural sector. 4C, sustainable coffee, Global Gap, and so on. These are all things that come into play when we're talking about broad quality. Plus, we're seeing increasingly stringent regulations for things like data protection, as I mentioned already, the Global Data Protection Regulation in Europe, Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados in Brazil, recycling of hazardous substances, waste of electrical electronic equipment directives in Europe, and things like accessibility, the UK Equality Act of 2010, particularly for things like websites, people whose sight is not so good, people with hearing disabilities, people with learning disabilities, making those accessible to all. Again, this is all within the context of broad quality. So how do we manage that? And I believe that the way that an organization manages it is by looking at its processes. You know, this idea of the process approach to quality, for me, it's embedded in the whole question of narrow quality, broad quality, or whatever. We need to think about, you know, what is it that we as an organization do? What are the processes that are important to transform our inputs, whether that's raw material or energy or information, transform that via a set of interrelated activities, which is the process, and transform that into hopefully desired outputs, which the customer, whether it's an internal or an external customer, will value. That is called our products and services. That is the reason that an organization exists. But then we have to think, broadening this out. What about undesired outputs, waste, accidents, corruption? Huge amounts of international development money in many countries is wasted and not put to a good use because of corruption of the regimes in those countries. So we broaden it out again towards other interested parties. It's not just about the customer. It's about the customer and their families and the society as a whole. So when we're thinking about what is it that we do within our organization, we have to think about how do we carry out this process or this set of processes. It may or it may not need to be documented. The extent of the planning depends on the risks associated with that. To what extent, if something goes wrong, might there be catastrophic effects? And what's the likelihood of something going wrong? Now, the risk professionals will take issue with me on that, because risk is not just about looking at things that might go wrong. It's also looking at how to do things better, looking at opportunities, looking at advantageous effects as well. How does that impact on our process? Well, we can look at the process, again, as I said earlier, from various different dimensions. We can think of the effect of those interrelated activities on product or service conformance. We can think about their impact on the environment, the potential for bribery. Obviously, manufacturing, in the manufacturing sector, the potential for bribery in the manufacturing process is probably very low. But for other processes, such as acquisition or sales or tendering, there the potential for bribery is much higher. Health and safety risks, energy usage, and so on. So again, we need to monitor and measure those aspects before, during, and after the process. And how much monitoring and measuring we're doing will also depend on the risk associated with that. So what we see is that the management system that is based on process takes into consideration risk. And then we have our good dear old friend, the plan, do, check, act cycle, where we're continually looking at the process. How was it planned? Is it achieving the desired results? Are we getting the data that we need back from that process? And how can we do things better next time? Not only at the level of the individual process, but at the level of the system and how all the processes fit together. So I hope that's been useful to, let's say, broaden your minds about the way that I see quality in the coming years. So pursuing broad quality for me means looking beyond the contractual customer, considering customer and consumer experiences. How easy is it to do business? How easy is it to interact? How does the customer feel about our company, not just the products and services that we are providing to them? We need to look back along the entire value chain, the entire supply chain. We need to think about how the products and services are being provided, our own efficiency and competitiveness as an organization, environmental, social, governance considerations. We need to be ready to embrace the new tools and methodologies in an intelligent way. Not just looking for, here's a tool, now I need to go out and find some way of applying that tool. Remembering, if we have a hammer, there's a saying we have in English, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And of course, in the hands of a skilled carpenter, a hammer can make wonderful furniture, wonderful toys for children, and so on. But in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, it can provide an awful lot of damage. So we also need to manage risks and opportunities. Look for ways of doing things better. Recognize opportunities when they knock, and be able to follow those opportunities, but cognizant of the potential risks associated with them. And finally, of course, make good, intelligent use of management system and other standards, implementing those which will be useful for you. Not just blindly going out and saying, here's this standard, it's just been published, I need to get certified. Certification is an important component. It helps to provide confidence, but that's not what it's all about. It's about actually making intelligent use of the standards as good practices, as guidelines, as requirements to be followed, and then being able to demonstrate to others as necessary that you are actually meeting the requirements of those standards. And that's where generally the third-party certification system comes in. So with that, I thank you very much. I apologize for the issues we had there with the slides. I hope it didn't mess things up too much. And with that, let me pass back to the organizers. And I think we still have time for a few comments. So I'll stop sharing and move back.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
I believe I say this with everyone in mind. Thank you so much for your words. Thank you so much for helping us a little bit with that. And we do have a few questions that we can go over them. And so Alice asked about the second machine age. Do you have tips for us professionals to implement this new tool and increase our knowledge and use it at most?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry. I'm not sure that I understood that. Is that in the chat?
And it's right there on the page. Do you see Fast Poly?
Okay. No, I can't see. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, I got it. Do you have tips for us professionals to implement these new tools and increase our knowledge to use it at most? Okay. I think with everything, the important thing is to recognize the whole panorama of tools that we have in our toolkit. We never stop learning. And it's to broaden, as I say, broaden our minds. We can only implement a tool if we know what the tool is for, what its limitations are, and where its potential applications might be. And I'm going bald up here, but many of you probably don't remember in the 1970s, 1980s, in the automotive sector, particularly in Brazil, we had this move towards SPC, statistical process control. And everybody was going crazy because all the big OEMs, car manufacturers, were saying, you must implement statistical process control. And many of the producers, suppliers, were going in and they were inventing stuff to put a statistical process control, to put a control chart in place. And many of these were meaningless. And they weren't really helping them to further their confidence in their quality product and service. But they were doing it because somebody was saying you have to use statistical process control. So I think it's that perception that is so important. Learn about the tools, understand them, and then apply the ones that are relevant for your particular business.
Awesome. We do have time for one more. Daniel said, can you help me understand what courses and certification I should focus on concerning this new era? I'm at management area, including contracts and supply chain.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. The core of all of this is and will continue to be the quality of the products and services that you are receiving from your suppliers, of course. But please remember this environmental, social, and governance issues. There is a standard that I think it was up there on the diagram somewhere, but I didn't pay any attention to it. The ISO 20400 on sustainable purchasing. So I think if you are in the supply chain and the contractual arena, then you need to be paying attention, not just is the product or service that I'm buying, is it meeting my contractual requirements, but is it fulfilling my obligations with society? Is it meeting my own organization's governance and my own organization's sustainability goals? So I would definitely think about that if I were in the contract and supply chain arena. Whether you need certification or not, I don't have anything against certification, absolutely not. But we need to sort of rethink this. Do I actually need to be certified, or do I need the knowledge? And sometimes it's more a question of acquiring the knowledge and the skills, and making sure that you apply that knowledge, that knowledge and those skills, rather than just getting a certificate. You know, I remember my father-in-law, who was one of my great teachers in the quality arena, Brazilian industrialist. He would say, "Well, you know, Nigel, I have a PhD, I have a doctorate in metallurgy from Sheffield University in the UK." And he would say, "Well, that doesn't make you competent. You've got a PhD, but you can still do stupid things. You know, you've learned all of this stuff. Now you need to go out and you need to apply it." So it's not just about the certificates. It's about the way that, and that's actually the definition of competence. It's the ability to apply skills and knowledge to achieve the desired result. So it's not just about getting more and more skills, knowledge. You know, these people, these sad people who sort of accumulate master's degrees and, you know, have all of the ASQ certified this, certified that. That doesn't make them competent. So it's not about the certification. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nigel. It was a pleasure in having you here with us. And thank you so much for everything.
You're very welcome. And boa sorte, good luck. And I hope everything turns out good for the FestQuali event. And I'm sure I see my good friend Dorothea Wernicke will be doing one of the closing, and she'll probably bring us back to this whole topic of road quality. So thanks a lot.
Sure. Thank you. It was our pleasure.
Okay. Bye.